right, welcome back. Well, for me,
For someone.
welcome myself back. No, you
Yes.
did a nice match breakdown. I really like that. That was that
You end
lady.
up checking that out?
Oh, I watched the whole thing. She's really good.
Yeah, she's quite good. She just got third at Nogi Pans
And
purple belt
that doesn't surprise me.
this weekend. Yeah, so
Yeah,
she's been working a lot. Sierra Hoover there,
yeah.
and she's been putting a lot of time into that Nogi, and she's in that adult competition level that is so competitive.
Oh my God, yeah.
Especially once you get to that purple belt level, it's just like you're dealing with literally people that train like pros, and she
Well,
she trains 2 to 3 times a day.
that's crazy, man. That's awesome. I mean, I'll even say this: at that level, even the blue belts are crazy tough at that. At that.
Nowadays,
Yeah,
you
they're
watch them and you're like, "This is
unbelievable.
incredible."
Yep. So it's
Um,
the game has, the levels have come up significantly. It's really cool for competitors.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Did you happen to listen to the solo episode that was before that? Because I did tease something that I was gonna throw at you, and I never messaged you about it. It
Dang
had to
it.
do with Element.
I didn't hit that part. I did because it was only like half an hour. I only got like 10 minutes through and I got distracted on something else. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it's called Meladoxin or Meladoxin, I think.
You
It's I
double
think it's like
check
a
the maltodextrin.
okay, it doesn't maybe, yes, like a sugar
Yeah, it's what
replacement or something like
maltodextrin.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this is the bugaboo. Obviously, we're fans of Element. Obviously, we like, the owners, they're in our community,
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Yep.
Well, they kinda got put in some hot water recently.
I didn't know that.
Um, yeah, yeah, and what happened is so they claim there's only 4, I believe it's milligrams, I could be wrong on the whether it's milligrams or whatever measuring, uh, amount, but
Okay.
I know there was a 4,
Okay.
and they said that that's how much of that stuff is in there,
Okay.
okay? What was it again?
Maltodextrin,
Mela
probably.
Maltodec yes, 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 and it turns out through testing, there's about 400 milligrams. So they're in a little bit of like some people are kind of like, guys, what the heck is this? You're a trusted provider, especially for the fitness community, which
I, I
tries to
I get it. Can we put those units in some context though?
sure.
Milligrams.
Yeah.
Okay, when we're talking about sugar, okay, whatever you want to call it, it's a
Hmm.
it is a sugar. Um, so usually when we look at food products, we look at grams of sugar, and so people are like, oh, this only has 4 grams of sugar, right?
Yeah.
1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. So
Okay.
400 milligrams is not even half a gram. You see where I'm going with
Mm,
this?
yeah.
We're talking about very small amounts as far as when we're talking about sugars or sweeteners. Okay. Compared to what we usually
Yeah.
think. Now, if it was like, oh, we tested it and they have like 40 grams of sugar or, something like that, um,
Yeah.
that's a lot of sugar. Or even 4 grams of sugar would be orders of magnitude more than 400 milligrams. So
Right.
here's the thing when you look at, and I have looked into this zero. I'm going on what you're
Right.
telling me. There was supposed to be how much? 40 and there was 400
So
milligrams?
it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
maltodextrin,
yeah, yeah.
4 milligrams. So in the past month or so, we've revealed the element contains upwards to 550 milligrams of
Milligrams.
maltodextrin.
Okay.
According to a statement by Element, there is between 250 and 550
Okay.
in the drink.
All right. So,
I'm reading through it. Some were upset by this revelation because Element's promise of no dodgy ingredients, quote. However, many rationalized it and said 4 milligrams is such a minuscule amount that it would not affect most people.
and
So I guess people are just upset
neither would
that
400 milligrams, by the way.
Interesting.
No, it's not. It's
Okay.
negligible amount is my point for that type of ingredient. Okay.
So, because like layman, right, that
Yeah.
doesn't have a chemical biology background like
Yeah.
yourself, I see 4, I see 550, and I'm like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a diabetic by the time I'm done
Yeah. Not
drinking
even
this."
fucking close. Excuse my language. No, I just, this kind of shit fires me up, man, because this
Mhm.
is where, and I'm not trying to be an elitist ass, but basic general science, stuff like high school science, right? Where
Sure.
we could kind of keep these units in perspective of what they are. And it also depends on what it is. If we're talking about lead or heavy metal, sure. There's,
Sure.
we don't want any of that crap in there, but maltodextrin, come on, man. Less
Yeah.
than so that wouldn't bother me one bit. And another thing is with analytical chemistry and mass production of anything,
Mhm.
I'm sure they third party, you have where they make it gets third party tested, quality control, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's also these kind of, when we do polling data, I hate this right before the election stuff, they're like margin of error, plus or minus, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Plus or minus whatever percent, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
Trump's up 48%, plus or minus 4 or whatever. So
Mhm.
these margins of error too, depending on what methodology they're using for detection. I was like Rob Wolf. I was a lab biochemist in my undergrad, and I did undergrad research for several years. And one of my jobs was um, using high performance liquid chromatography, which is a way of detecting certain biological compounds. My point is, it depends on what process and what protocol you're using in analyzing amounts of stuff. Okay. And depending
Mm.
on what methodology and or instrumentation you're using, there can be large variances in detection on what is true and what isn't. And so when someone hears 4 versus, or whatever they said, 40 versus 400, I don't know what you,
It was 4, like, just
dude,
4 compared to
yeah, dude.
550.
Yeah. So with that ingredient, that wouldn't even make my eyebrows raise, man. And, I'm not trying to defend someone. I'm just trying to be honest and just,
Yeah.
does that make a difference to me as a physician and, prior biochemist, and
Yeah.
whether or not I'm going to take element or not, with that kind of thing. Now, if there's something fairly egregious and they're putting stuff in there that they didn't claim was in, if they said,
Sure.
oh, none of that, and then all of a sudden we find out there's saccharin in there, or you know what I'm saying, or um, some kind of other artificial sweetener that is definitely has some, problems.
Yeah.
Aspartame or something like that, right? Where I'd be like, what the hell, right? That's the kind of stuff would
Sure.
piss me off. But this is we got people on the internet trying to play gotcha basically, and it's a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. If what you told me is in fact, if that was
What they
accurate,
found, and
yeah, I would have to see. Yeah, but just on face value, that's what I think about that.
yeah, that makes sense. And I don't know if you can just briefly, because I'll probably clip this, if you can just briefly say, what your background is with the chemical biology side, just so people know that it's coming from an educated source.
Yeah,
And
so
we're not an Element sponsored podcast.
far from it.
We've talked plenty about drinking or using ballast and other alternatives, not because
I'm
we
using
dislike Element, but
I,
yeah.
I alter them all the time as long as they look pretty decent. I'm using another one right now just to try out. I
Hmm.
don't have any definite loyalty. I just hate nonsense and I hate blowing shit out of proportion, which what the internet
Yeah.
tends to do over things. Go look for there's some real shit out there. So anyway, my background, I have a bachelor's of science in biochemistry. I did 3 years of lab research with published papers on transfer RNA and cancer. My wife, as you well know, along with being a physician and has a master's in biochemistry, we talk that stuff all the time around the house. It's how
Yeah.
I base my medical practice is on a very strong, whether it's nutrition or all that is very
Right.
much based on that biochemistry background. I don't claim to be an expert. Um,
Sure.
matter of fact, I don't claim to be an expert in anything. I'm a lifelong student. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, yeah. That sure isn't going to stop me from using it. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm happy we actually touched base on that because, like I said, for me, I was like, oh, geez, but once again, that's just coming from a place of ignorance and how most
Mhm.
people are going to read these articles. So
Yeah,
hopefully, some of these, if we clip this, it gets out there a little bit.
sure.
Um,
Yeah, sure. It doesn't bother me.
so I do have a question. I was reading the Grappler's Diary. Yeah, I was reading the Grappler's Diary and from Chris Wojcik,
Mm,
and he posed an interesting question that I felt would be interesting to have two kind of normies give our 2 cents on from a coach's perspective,
mhm.
um, as well as competitor slash practitioners. So I did have a question. I was reading the Grappler's Diary by Chris Wojcik, and he posed an interesting question, and I thought it would be interesting to hear what I wouldn't say I'm like an active, full blown competitor, but I'm especially going to be competing more in the future. And I competed a decent amount in the last couple of years. We're both coaches. So this might be kind of a good question for us to ask, especially since we're not at a famous gym.
Well, yeah, and and I'm as soon as I get my orthodontics off, I'm jumping back in the
Going to
ring
compete more
in on
too.
the mat too. Yeah, so for sure.
Yeah. So the question to pose is how to be high level at jujitsu, like as a practitioner standpoint slash competitor
Yeah.
without training at a famous gym. Now, I have a couple things laid out that from Chris's side that I wanted to bring up, Wojcik's, but is there something that comes to mind right away? Now, maybe there's a couple things, but is
Yeah.
there one thing that comes to mind right away
Yeah.
that you'd bring up?
Yeah, this comes up in MMA circles all the time. We talk about whether someone's from like American Top Team or or oh, they're from a gym no one's really heard of, but they're really good. So
Mm,
it comes to mind right away. I think the argument for having kind of a high profile gym is attracting high level competitors as well, so you can train with a higher level of folks consistently,
mhm.
like more, right? So you would have, at one of those gyms, you'd have more people coming to that gym for competition training. Thus, your training
Yeah.
partners are typically that higher level with that competition goal in mind. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And I would say, and I pretty much agreed with a lot of what Wojcik was saying. I might reword some of this stuff. But one is with lack of quality. So by not being at a famous gym, you're dealing with other people. Like there's always going to be gyms are going to have their like toughest guys, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you're typically not going to have like we were just talking about Sierra. She's an active purple belt adult level competitor that is getting podiums at majors. Not every gym is going to have a crop of those kind of competitors. So, what do you do in that case? And I would agree with Wojcik, and that's with lack of quality has to be made up with quantity, and it's difficult. So you will need to kind of focus even more, and you're probably going to have to put in even more work than the person at the famous gym that every time they go to the gym they're going to get these high level looks. So you're probably going to have to put a little bit more time into studying, being intentional when you're at the gym, and maybe even training frequency. So the pro might be able to, or pro that's at a pro gym, I should say, because you could be a blue belt, you could be a purple belt, right? Someone we used to have at the gym, his name's Tom, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guy was a physically very gifted. He progressed very quickly. He studied a lot, and one of the reasons he was able to progress fairly quickly is because quantity wise, he trained a lot in a short period of time. So he was kind of able to maintain grappling with some of these more prominent competitors, right? So I think there's a chance that if you are at a gym that maybe doesn't have the ceiling of competitors at your gym, you might have to make a little bit up on the quantity side. And once again, that doesn't mean training harder more often. It kind of means training smarter more often
Yep.
than anything. So your recovery is going to have to be on point. You're studying, you're actually showing up and being intentional while you're at the gym.
So, yeah, and so those are some good points. I was just about to say, to push back on that
Hmm.
definition, but you gave me an expanded what you mean by that. So, yeah, you're off the mat quantity has to be higher, not just on the mat. And like you said, intentional because we have a very high level professor as far as technical ability, coaching, and all that. And I would say, by watching some footage of like let's say kind of the people you're going to be going against, um, you know, watching some of the footage, which there's a lot available, and then coming up with a game plan with a very knowledgeable coach um,
Hmm.
is great. And some drilling some of those scenarios, I think, is invaluable. I think that could make a huge difference when you don't have just um, a competition gym is just different. I mean, I'm a hobbyist or whatever you want to call me. I do it
Hmm.
for other reasons, not to be a professional jiu-jitsu athlete. But I think
Right.
if you have a high level coach like we certainly have, and he's also a good competitor, but I think you can make up for that somewhat. So I do agree with that.
I think what's interesting is you kind of bled in with your rebuttal there. You kind of bled into two of my other answers,
Yeah.
which is interesting. So I'll go into one, and and this was going to be my last point, which is find a coach that will invest in you. How Chris Wojcik said it was find a good coach. Now, I think that's kind of a little too broad of just find a good coach, but I think you need to find a coach that will actually invest their time into you for your goals. So, one, you need to be transparent about your goals that, hey, I'm looking to compete, I'm looking to jump around a lot and like really put some effort into this part of jiu-jitsu, which is competition. And then find a coach because not every coach has the bandwidth to invest in you in that way. Not every coach has a desire, right? So you want to find one that kind of matches your goals and desires. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go to some name brand gym too,
Mm-mm.
because there's going to be, and most likely it won't be one coach, the head guy, the head professor at the gym. Most likely at a non-famous gym, it's going to be a little bit of a team effort of gyms, or excuse me, of coaches, right? Where there's the head professor, but then there's going to be a brown belt and then another black belt or two or something that also help.
Yeah, and so I've seen this. So, for instance, we had a very talented young lady, a purple belt, Carrie Ann,
Mhm.
that competed quite a bit. She went off to college here recently, but through her high school years, and Andrew made the time and like, hey, let's study this, let's drill this, and then oh, by the way, you need some help on. I'm just making it up. I'm not saying this applied to her, but let's say you need some. This person's a you're going against has some good judo, let's just say, and so there's someone in the gym that has like been doing that has a focus on someone like, hey, I want you to. So the
Mhm.
professor is directing them over to some people that are kind of have interest or subject matter expertise in certain different little things. Like, let's say, hey,
Yeah,
you have a good DARS entry. Hey, but I want you to go to work with so and so who gets them. That's kind of their thing. But having
yeah,
someone to kind of, it's really important having someone go into your professor and say, hey, can you kind of help me? And some of that will be just delegating and saying, hey, I want you to go this, this, and this with these different people as well too, to kind of round out your game. So yeah, that's
yeah. I agree, and I think some things that you're going to be. How do I tell? Well, if your professor just cares, like, or let's say they don't really roll much, or yeah, we're taking injury and stuff like that out of the equation. an even age. If you have a 65-year-old professor, he's not going to roll a whole lot, right? But when they're not rolling, are they just bullshitting? Especially when they know that they have certain students with certain goals. Are they not paying attention to their students to help them kind of point out, like you just said, hey, I think you should probably work on this. I'm seeing you're struggling with this. We need to improve here. From the last tournament, we kind of got caught up here. Let's do this. So they're evaluating and then figuring out little mini game plans, maybe not for a specific tournament, but for your growth.
Mhm.
So that's one. Number two is the opposite. Maybe the professor only rolls and they never take the time to kind of evaluate because they're just getting their own because maybe they're an active competitor. I think that's actually really common at some of these
Mm.
famous gyms where the head coach is still an active
I
competitor.
was gonna bring that up. Yeah.
They have, they have to be selfish, right? A
Yep.
little bit.
Yep.
And how do they pass? Do they delegate, like you just said? Or does it kind of, does the lower level belt wise people, do they kind of get pushed off and it's kind of fend for yourself? Now, maybe it is. And in that case, you got to fend for yourself and you're going to have to be proactive, going back to the first thing that we talked about. But identifying that is going to be huge because you might be able to find, because they're out there. There are coaches out there and gyms out there that are willing to invest in to you as an individual for your growth, but also have competition in mind and stuff like that. Those are out there, but sometimes it does take a little bit of searching.
Well, I mean, I think I'm fortunate to have, by the way, I'm going to get Andrew on here so he and I can kind of sit down and do another podcast because,
That'd be awesome.
yeah, because, I just talked to our professor. That's the only one and I'm, looking around, I feel like
Yeah.
super fortunate because he's very competition minded strategy. He likes competition in whether, even if it's not jujitsu, he is a competitive in a good way type of person. He looks at different
Hmm.
strategies. He has that kind of analytical mind. Very much like you could argue that Danaher doesn't roll a lot. He's one of the best
Hmm.
jiu-jitsu
Right.
he's in the world, right? But you need someone like that that is passionate about that, looks at the strategy, will watch some video, and then can translate that and give you good advice. I mean, I think that's great. And I think you can come up and do real well at a quote unquote lesser known gym. And like you said, the flip side of that is some of those, they are active. A lot of these guys are active competitors themselves, and so you
Yeah.
you might get neglected when you think you're actually in the best place. So it's hard to say.
Totally. Another thing is another one on my list here. And if you think of something, just
Mm-hmm.
pop in. But is compete often. I think this is unfortunately well, it's a couple things that prevent this. One is money. So if you're trying to be an active competitor, you're probably training a lot, which means you're not working a lot, and that can be difficult to kind of have that balance there. But being able to compete often, I think, is huge. A lot of time we do these camps where like we're gonna prepare for a tournament 4, 5, 6 weeks out in advance. When instead it should just be no, just compete. Compete as much as you can. Maybe for big, like you have like really big tournaments coming up. I
Mm-hmm.
understand doing a camp for that. But for the most part, just compete and make those nerves easy to deal with. Your body is used to it. Your body's used the schedule, the nerves, the environment, the intensity. The more you compete, the easier it's going to be and the better you're going to perform. It's just like doing a move, right? Yeah, I got to drill my arm bars because I want them to be cleaner and I want them to be better. So how do I do that? I do them more, compete more, and don't try to just be ready for a tournament. Always be ready, especially if you're. This is for people that want to compete, right?
Right.
Like that's the big part.
No, I agree. In the military, we say, train like you fight. And the best way to do that is actually be in the simulate. Get out there and get exposed to
Yeah.
competition. Because it's not. And Andrew says this a lot. Because you can roll one way in the gym, but he often says, hey, the person sometimes at the competition, the best jujitsu person didn't win. The person that knew the rules and took advantage and knew where they were during the match as far as strategy goes. Because,
Mhm.
if you're up by a point and there's 30 seconds left and you're on top, you're not going to go for an armbar. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, you would.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. Or, if you roll like that intentionally when you're, like competition rolling doesn't necessarily mean competition intensity. It just means, hey, I'm keeping track of my points. I'm seeing where my time is. And you can even get some,
Mhm.
we do this at the gym too. We'll have a couple of the other upper belts coach each one of the participant when they're, like simulated coaching so they can get used to hearing those
Wow.
verbal cues too. And that's a huge part of it because being coachable usually means being aware and not being if you're in your first couple tournaments. And I can tell you I have a little anxiety about mat rest, not being out in the competition for a couple years because of various things. But when you're back in there, if you have tunnel vision and everything, you can't even hear anything except for you get into that weird kind of
Yeah.
very focused mindset and you're not even open to your surroundings. But that comes with comfort, like you said. The more you're competing, the more you will be in the moment and aware, the more you will be able to hear your coach's verbal cueing. So that all kind of comes together with frequency of competition and being comfortable in that environment. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. I just dropped that little nugget on somebody. The not always the best practitioner wins in tournaments
For
or super fights or competition.
I've seen it.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, often, and I'm not saying 80% of the time or anything, but often the better practitioner does not win. And I even told him, I was like, I've done well at black belt, and it's not because I'm better than these guys. It's I've strategically beat them at like stacking points, or advantages, and which is something like you just said, Andrew. Really, when it comes to
Yeah.
tournament prep, we that was very big on our prep was stacking points and advantages. So then you can open up towards the end of a match or have a buffer.
That's right. But, if you're up a couple points or no, hey, I'm down 2 points, you're not going to play it safe anymore, right? You're
The
going to,
urgency,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And so that's a whole skill set in itself, not just putting together our routine sparring. Um, you know, it, perfect.
totally.
I'm going to use this to talk some crap if you don't mind. So yesterday,
Please.
our good buddy Boots, um, we had a good roll. He had a good roll in, and let's just say for 4.5 of the 5 minutes, he was uh, he was feeling a little pressure. Let's just put it that way. And but he ended up catching me.
Yeah.
I got sloppy, and he had a really good catch. He ended up catching me in a choke, like in the last 15 seconds or something, and then
Oh, what a
jumped. Well,
cheater.
wait,
He
wait, no,
probably cheated for
no,
sure.
no, it was legit. It was good. But what's funny part is he went up. It's like the proverbial spiking the football in the end zone celebration, jumping up and down. Like, what time is
Oh,
it?
yeah.
We're gonna pull the video footage. But my point
He's
is,
such a ham.
yeah, my point is, I'm bringing that up just to talk a little trash, but also to illustrate a point. If I was in competition at that point with that 30 seconds left, I would not be doing some of the stuff I was doing in that last 30 seconds. I'd be like super
Right.
conservative is my point. Cause I was already
Yeah.
up on points is my
Well, it makes sense because, when in the training room, when you're going against like a very, like feminine man, it's like you need to let off a little bit and allow them to work a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with being a feminine man. It's just he's a gentle soul, and You gave him a little room. I think that was nice of you, honestly, more than anything.
Yeah, I wish I could say I gave him some room. I didn't really. I was just,
Uh,
no, it was legit. It's just that, he said, yeah, and I said, I'm sure you're gonna post the whole video, aren't you? He goes, oh no, I'm just gonna clip the last 10 seconds.
yeah, he's gonna watch it on the toilet every night.
Oh, well,
I'm sure his wife was extremely embarrassed when he was doing the celebrations and all
she
that.
wasn't there, and I think that's part of it. She was in, like, my
That's
spouse.
definitely part of it.
So both of our wives were away this weekend. Carrie is coming back from a conference in Utah, and his wife was out of town too. So I was like, "Oh, I see you're a little out of control." Yes.
Cats will play.
Mm, yeah, it's
Or
funny.
mice will play when the cat's away.
But I was just using that
Well, that
to,
brings up
yeah, I'm just illustrating a
yeah,
point. I thought.
exactly. It's perfect. And speaking of boots, the next point kind of like talks about something that might have to do with him.
Mm,
So I think, and Wojcik said the same thing, is study what the pros are doing. See what the most recent, and I do hate this term, but study what the most recent meta is. Now, I hate that term, but study what all the top people, especially the ones that you kind of identify with. Like, I really like Tommy Langacker. I like his style. I feel like it's my style's kind of a retarded version of his.
mm,
And then like Diego Pato, I really like
mm,
some of his stuff.
mm-hmm,
So I will watch a lot of one, identify some pros that you like their style and you want to kind of emulate. I did this with, a little side note. When I was coming up in photography and videography, I identified like there was certain photographers that I really, really liked. Larry Chen. I loved his automotive photography. So what I would do is I would see images he would take. I would then try to capture almost the same image, the same feel, same colors and tone and angles. I would just try to recreate it on my own and almost like back engineer it, right? And then through that process, I'm learning how to do it, and then I can make it my own. Once I kind of have gotten a little bit further down the line of being able to, oh, okay, so if I do this, that darkens this, but then if I turn the headlights on the car, it kind of makes that pop, and then the sunset looks, whatever. Same thing with jiu-jitsu.
yep,
You start watching um, Adam Warzinski, and you're like, man, I gravitate towards butterfly. Well, you start watching Adam, and you start seeing what he's doing in
mm-hmm.
the most at the highest levels, hitting people with butterfly sweeps when they know that's his game. So you're gonna start almost seeing what the most advanced stuff is, and then playing with that.
Absolutely
What,
good.
what do you think about that?
Oh, I've done it all my life with guitar. When I was coming up learning how to play, I would emulate and try to learn, especially in high school, learned, one of my favorite guitar players' solos. And through that, I would then like, well, what is that? Why is he doing that? Then I'd figure out, oh, what was the music theory behind that? Why is that cool? Is that
Mhm.
vibrato good? But then taking that, you don't want to be a clone of everyone, but
Right.
but you can. It's a great learning vehicle where you can kind of apply some of those concepts as a springboard for development.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, of course, I agree.
And that goes into your study time, right? When we talk about studying,
Yep.
it doesn't have to be this notepad and paper thing, but if that's how you learn, then do it, and find who you like. I just started with finding who I liked watching the most. Hoffa Mendez
Oh
was
gosh, yeah.
I just thought I still do, but like when I watch him, I'm like, it just looks pretty. I was like, I would like to have pretty jujitsu. And
Yeah,
so I would just watch him roll. Not even like instructional. It's probably
right.
similar to you with the guitar.
Yep.
You're just watching someone do solos and just riff and then you're like, man, that the flow and how clean, like I think on top of my head, Joe Bonamassa, he plays guitar very clean. His style is very clean. So it's like, how can you play in a very clean manner? If you want to learn clean guitar, then you watch him. And it's kind of, or like, you know, whoever else you could think of. But
Hmm.
um you start to see people that are doing what you kind of want,
Hmm.
and then you just start to emulate them.
That's exactly right. And
Another one.
yep.
reg-
No.
Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, no, no, no. It's a fine. Go ahead. You can go segue to your next point.
Well, and it's pretty much the last one, and
Okay.
that's sacrifice. Now, this is really for the people that are they have like a timeline in mind. Maybe they want to get really good really fast, or they have certain competition goals in mind. I really want to win the rev, or
Mhm.
I want to be able to podium at a major. I want to win the Portland Open, IBJJF Portland Open, something like that. Well, it doesn't matter. You need to, and this honestly goes to anything in life, really. You need to sacrifice things. You need to do the hard thing. You need to not go out on a Friday night, and you should spend it in the gym, or just don't drink and all that crap. Um, like, I'm not saying you got to cut all that stuff out like completely or anything like that, but
Man,
when
you've turned
you're
over
trying,
I was going to say you turned over a new leaf. I thought you were going to call one of our boys out. That's
oh, which
notorious.
one?
I'm not saying a damn thing. I was just proud of you.
You'll have to
So
tell
about
me when we stop recording, because I can't think of who you're thinking of.
drinking the night before coming into training. Really? Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a little
You could com-
sauciness there.
competing too.
Um,
Go ahead. I'm
gosh.
sorry. I stole your
Um,
role.
call them out. Just do it.
I'm not
Stop being a
going to.
weenie.
No.
Um, so there has to be some sacrifice there, and it's short-term sacrifice. That's the crazy thing, is we're not even talking about some crazy long-term sacrifice. We're talking about short-term, which is not that hard.
Well,
And once you get used to doing I think once you get used to doing short-term sacrifices, it becomes easier.
Well, it becomes part of your lifestyle too. It's very much like any kind of, when I'm looking at someone for lifestyle medicine, where, trying to lose weight or, put their diabetes in remission or something like that. Um, what I'm asking them when we come up with a plan, when I say we, not me, but we both do together as a doctor and patient, and say, hey, what do you think you could work on first? And that is a sacrifice to them, right? At the time. And then it becomes part of like, well, gosh, I really don't need that. I'm feeling a lot better doing this. And so the same thing could be,
Mm,
your goals then kind of shape the way you live your life too, even the short term ones. And they become, I'm not saying you can never go and have, obviously you should have fun.
right.
That's what life is about. But as far as something in regularity, let's say you go off every Friday night and just gets plastered, right? Eventually you're going to be like, yeah, I'm not feeling that anymore because I haven't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's all I had. I can
I
see
love
you.
it. I love it.
I can see the gears turning. I can just
I'm
watch
just
it.
trying not to get
I know,
just trying to keep my friends
which is
is all I'm trying to do.
which is hilarious. It's like everything you can do. It's like putting a biscuit on a dog's nose and like, no, don't eat it yet.
I'm gonna do it.
All right, now.
Um, so those are my 5 points, and they kind of echo Chris Wojcik's 5 points on
Yeah.
that. Once again, check out Grappler's Diary. He's got a great read. He puts stuff out basically daily.
Well,
Um,
and he has a lot of, I mean, he's lived, I mean, 80 cc. I mean, the guy's, so,
true.
I mean, he's lived.
Active competitor.
Yeah. Yeah. So that means a lot, but I like that subject. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, and but with that, I'll segue into a question we had that came in. It's a health question
Okay.
from Fabian. He says, "Hey guys, been finding the podcast very informative and helpful. I'm a 49-year-old BJJ hobbyist from Cape Town, South Africa.
Nice.
Uh,
For
Dr. Chris talks
being
about
49. Yeah.
yeah, Dr. Chris talks about central nervous system overload.
Yep.
What should one be looking out for in terms of possible symptoms? And then how would one treat or resolve this? Secondly, lately I've really struggled with sleep and feel that it's really affecting recovery.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Any advice, thoughts, ideas would be helpful. Now, just to before I kick you off,
I'm like,
we do have a sleep episode. Yeah, you're just like me a minute ago. We do have a sleep episode. I will put it in the description down here of this episode so you can click on that. But that will have there's a lot of good information in that on uh, pre-sleep routine.
mm-hmm.
That's a lot of the time where we kind of screw ourselves is that lead up to going to bed, where we can really improve that. There's a few different methods within that, and then Chris talks about different things that will just help with sleep,
Yep.
whether that's supplemental or lifestyle.
Yep.
But why don't you go ahead and talk to him about the central nervous system overload?
Yeah.
What should one be looking for in terms of possible symptoms,
Yep.
and how to treat slash resolve?
Okay. This is Fabian, right? That's his name?
Yes.
Okay. Great question. We also have some episodes. We did one on the stress cup. Go back and listen to that one too. And that
Early episode.
early episode and another one that was an over the initial overtraining episode we talked about. So it's all kind of the
Mm,
same theme. So the central nervous system overload, aka allostatic load, meaning just very briefly. So I'm not putting you guys to sleep. The At any one time in your life, and I mean that one time, it could vary from week to week, year to year, especially, and there's a trend as we get older. We have a capacity to deal with all sources of stress, including positive stressors like working out, um, things that are, sauna, cold immersion. All those things are stressors, but can be beneficial as long as you got to watch the overall stress load. Sleep is one of the largest contributors to allostatic overload, or overloading the central nervous system, especially you're 49, a little, not much, 6 years younger than me, but dude, I remember 49. I was struggling with the same issues. So the signs of it we talked about in that overtraining episode, but just briefly, um, there's a couple ways you can look at this depending on how technical you want to get. If you really want to get high tech approach to this, go look at the Morpheus app. Um, Joel, what's
mhm.
Joel's last name? He was one of Demetrius
I don't.
Johnson's coach. Dang it, I
Yeah,
know it.
I
It's one
don't
of those things I
remember.
know, and I don't know why I'm not pulling his last name. Really smart coach, but he kind of founded this whole app and wearable device that will track your heart rate variability. Um, and heart rate variability, this was part of the episodes. If you go back and look, we explain what that is. It's basically beat to beat variations in your heart rate. If your heart rate's very mechanical, it's like exactly, let's say if it was 60 beats per minute, every beat is on every exact second. That's usually a predictor of a sympathetic nervous system dominance. In other words, the flight or fight dominance. Where if you're more parasympathetic, the opposite, where you're kind of in a relaxed state, you're well recovered, the beat to beat variation will be greater. So like one
Mm,
beat is like 1.1 seconds. The time between the next two beats is maybe zero point 0.8. I'm just making up numbers, but you can see there's a variability.
sure.
So that variability, the higher the variability to an extent, means you're in a more parasympathetic or recovered state. So there's that app, that Morpheus app, is absolutely fantastic, but it is.
You used that
I
for a
used I
while.
used one of his earlier iterations.
Okay.
It wasn't the Morpheus thing, but he's moved over and it's gotten really sophisticated and pretty darn good. The algorithms they're using. Um,
Mm,
but again, it's not for everyone. If you're a kind of a techie and you like to track and like to look at all the data, if you're a data type person, but you can get down a rabbit
mhm.
hole pretty quickly with that stuff. It's really cool because you can kind of predict, where you're at as your recovery score, right? And it's kind of helpful for a lot of people. I did it for a while just to kind of train my own what we call interoception. Like, hey, how do you feel? What is your perceived readiness to train? You know, your kind of gut level instinctive thing. How are you feeling? And I used that HRV for several months to kind of train my own internal sense on how I'm doing. Does that, in other words, is how I'm feeling right now reflective on that data I'm getting from that heart rate variability? So
Mm,
that's where it's useful. But some lower tech approaches, um, even resting heart rate, um, you generally will take a baseline when you're relaxed. You know, and let's say you're on vacation, you take your resting heart rate, you know, take your pulse for 60 seconds, and that's your resting heart rate. If that jacks up, like if in the morning you just check it and it's significantly, let's say 10 or 15 beats higher, that means you're more sympathetic dominant. You're probably under recovered a bit. And again, sleep is the
mm.
first thing. One to 2 nights of bad sleep, yeah, it will wreck your recovery like nothing else. There's nothing else on the planet that will wreck your recovery like a bad night of sleep. Maybe a real getting trashed the night before with alcohol. That's kind of neck and neck with as far as recovery goes. But getting that
But
sleep,
we're talking about these are like even.
dude, sleep, two or 3 nights of bad sleep can put a healthy, metabolically healthy person into a pre-diabetic state as far as how they're handling blood glucose. That's how, and it is a huge inflammatory hit to the brain. It's a big stress response. So if you got a night of bad sleep, the next day you really got to watch what you're actually doing. I would say instead of going to hard training, light drilling, some walks, some active recovery type things, but nothing strenuous type of thing after a bad sleep night. It just, especially at 49 years old. Now, those of you that are in your 20s listening, they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, you're right. Whatever. You can probably eat bullets and be just fine.
Right.
But the things that, and the other thing you can do is the grip testing. We've talked about that before, where you get one of those
Mm,
dynamometers, you know, where you actually can squeeze and it will give you a number. Um, that's good because then you can get a baseline. And in the morning, you can kind of do a grip test first in the morning. And if your grip is significantly lower, um, a grip is a really good proxy for state of the central nervous system. It really is, as far as its fatigue or not. So that's another way you can tell. Another symptom of overtraining symptom is just feeling like I don't really feel like training, especially if you love jujitsu. You're like, gosh, I really not feeling it today.
yeah.
You know, that's a symptom. Frequent respiratory infections. This is my bane of my existence, man. Bill, you can
Mhm.
tell, you know, firsthand. I love
Yeah.
jujitsu so much. I get into trouble frequently with overtraining because I'm a dummy and I don't listen to the kind of, you know, what I'm telling people on the podcast.
Right.
And right.
Oh, yeah.
And so then
Yeah.
you know, frequent respiratory infections is another one. Irritability, mood
Can
swings.
I
Yeah.
point something out with the grip tester
Mhm.
is, and it's something you already knew, obviously, but we saw it firsthand, is be consistent on how you grip and squeeze.
Yeah.
What I mean is you can take this gripper and put it up by your face, and then you're gonna like extend your arm and you're gonna like try to like really squeeze the heck out of that thing. Or sometimes you're gonna like pull it down,
Yep.
sometimes you're gonna extend your arm out,
Yep.
and you will get different results
Yep.
depending on how
I
you grip it. So be consistent.
I like, just for consistency's sake, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up. I like bringing my elbow into my ribs at a 90 with my arm at a 90-degree angle and with my arm out in
Yeah,
front of me.
kind of like that.
Yep. And then just with my
Yeah.
elbow actually touching my ribs. So I'm not using any end to just squeeze. I'm not
Can you
trying
put
to,
some respect on the pipes?
yeah, I guess.
You got one of those? I
Dude.
can't focus it.
I mean, it's
Where's
okay,
the
man.
veins?
Oh,
You don't
dude.
you don't got no veins.
I don't know what to say, dude.
You didn't know beef was on the menu today,
Well,
huh?
what I'm gonna laugh at you when you're 60 and you have these horrible varicose veins.
It's gonna be so
It's
gross.
gonna be
It's
disgusting.
cool right now, and
It's
it's gonna get so
You're
ugly.
gonna be like, dude, you know a good dermatologist to take care of this stuff? I'm like, yeah, you need to go get some stripping done, son. It's gonna be rough. Anyway, go ahead and be proud of him, though. It's good. Yeah. So, but
Don't
anyway,
judge me.
as
What
so I'm as we'll digress now. We were
what
digress.
you were I interrupted you on, more
I was talking about,
symptoms.
yeah, I was just talking about like irritability, and oh, by the way, difficulty sleeping. It's paradoxical, right? Where you're like, well, the increased stress and central nervous system overload can then itself cause difficulty sleeping, likely because of a cortisol response. So you're getting higher levels of cortisol at times of day when they're not supposed to be there. And cortisol is a stimulating hormone; it's a stress hormone. And people that are in kind of like an overtrained state will get what we call tired but wired. You're like, dude, I'm
Mm,
so tired, but now I freaking can't fall asleep, type of thing. And it's the most frustrating thing in the world. Um, but we talk about that during our sleep episode too, of some things that can help mitigate that. But the training volume is super. So Fabian asked about, well, what
yeah,
can I do?
and really, you're answering both of his
I
questions.
am. Yeah, you need to at 49 years old, you need to monitor your training load. And whether you want to call it overtraining or whether you want to call it under recovery, it's the same thing. Okay. Whatever semantic, you know, works for you. But you really need to watch your training volume, and then times, and it's not the same all the time. If I feel really well recovered,
Mhm.
I'll hit it, right? But if I know I'm feeling a little stale and I'm just not, when I feel like I'm under recovered or overtrained, I really got to watch my training volume. Okay. And it can change. It's not like, oh, I'm this age, so thus I can only train this hard for, this many days of the week. I might have some general guidelines, but there are days where I feel more recovered and I'll hit it harder that day. In
Mm.
days where I'm feeling like a little, I'm not sharp, my technique is off, my timing is off. I can know I'm a little overtrained. I'm gonna really back off and do more recovery stuff, maybe do some mobility work, maybe, and the roles are just be very
Active recovery.
active recovery stuff, man. You've got to manage your stress cup day to day. And it's a day to day thing. And by the way, the sad joke is people in your 20s have this monster big gulp looking stress cup, and those of us in our 50s have a little Dixie cup that you get at the dentist office. So there's not a lot of room in that sucker to manage it, right?
This is your sprayer, this little guy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's what we're dealing with, a smaller and smaller capacity to handle daily stress. So that's why we have to be in, as we age and do a hard physical activity like jujitsu, we have to have our recovery on point, get our sleep dialed in. It's got to be a priority for you. And then also have the discipline, and I'm being a hypocrite because I fail in this all the time, is when you go in and you're not feeling as good, you have to have the discipline to say, hey, look, no, I'm not going to do any sparring today. Or if I do, it's going to be like someone that I try, just like, hey, we're just going to do some positional stuff that is like 30%, really
Ugh.
light.
It's hard. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
it's just so hard to do.
I know. Okay. I didn't, I didn't know you had a weird look on your face. I'm making sure. I didn't know if you were constipated or not. I didn't know what
Yeah,
was going on there. But that's the
a
really,
little bit of all of it.
yeah, there's no magic fix, Fabian, for this. It's just really managing that day-to-day stress cup. And go back and listen to those episodes on the stress cup, allostatic load, and overtraining, and be on the lookout for
Mm.
those symptoms. And it's tough, man. There's no two ways about it. I used to train 6 days a week when I was in my 20s. I was a Navy diver. You know, I used to laugh. I used to say people were making excuses and they were just wusses, you know, they couldn't. And I'm eating those
Yeah.
words big time now in my 50s. So
Yeah, and we talk about supplements in those episodes as well, so
yeah.
we won't touch on those here. The one I will is something recently I actually noticed a difference, and that was I take ashwagandha
Hmm.
uh, for at night, and I switched, and sometimes I'll cycle off of it just for a month or
Hmm.
something like that. And I recently switched to phosphatidylserine instead. Um, and I noticed just for my own chemical makeup, my cardio started going down uh, a great deal. Where I was just my cardio was staggeringly bad
Hmm.
comparatively. Now, I also was identifying like, I think maybe I'm waking up a little bit more tired. And Olivia recommended, she asked, well, how long you been on phosphatidylserine? I said, probably like 3 weeks. She said, switch back to ashwagandha. Let's make sure our screen time at the end of the night isn't as much,
Hmm.
and see what happens. A week later, honestly, maybe even less. I want to say it was within a week,
Yeah.
5 days. My cardio felt way better. I was waking up with more energy. It purely that goes into the quality of sleep I was having,
Yeah. That,
and it made a huge, huge
well, you're also
difference.
bringing up a
So,
point about,
we
I was just saying that what you were talking about with phosphatidylserine shows that individual variability with supplements, and not every one affects everything the same. Fabian, something you can also play around with. Go listen to our episode on methylene blue. Just make sure you're not taking any psychiatric medications. But for an older grappler, that can be super good for performance and helping your mitochondria out. But yeah, I mean, that it really is just managing your training load day to day.
yeah, that's gonna be huge, and as you already illustrated, sleep is gonna be
Number one.
number 1,
Yep.
and his question has to do with both. So it's one is just literally causing the other to be in the toilet. So,
Yeah.
um, check out those episodes. Let us know if anything works for you or what you did to make things better. Would love to hear some results in the next week or two, honestly. I think that'd be great, Fabian. So thank you for the question.
Yep.
Chris, go ahead and hit the music. Grapplingwithpodcast@gmail.com. If you guys have questions, you can also hit us up on Instagram and DM us any questions you have for Chris or jiu-jitsu related topics or anything like that. Or if you just want to hear some drama, talk about Wiltsy and his house burning down. We won't get into it, but maybe I will on a solo episode. So, Chris, thank you. You're beautiful.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's good seeing you, man.
Yeah, we'll see everyone next time.
All right. Bye, folks.